desert, black leather, and cars. What do you think of when you put those three ingredients together? Only one thing should come to mind if you're cultured at all, and that's Mad Max. Leather-based clothing companies around the world have Mad Max to thank for their sales, because goddamn, these movies made black leather very cool. The best way I can describe the Mad Max movies is this: the rule of cool over everything. That's the only thing that matters, really. The first movie is a lot more nuanced than the rest. Every single subsequent film, though, is kind of one note in that they mostly revolve around Max getting wrapped up in other people's problems, and then their problems become his problems. And it normally involves cars. In fact, it always involves a bunch of cars driving through the desert, and they're blowing up, and they're trying to kill each other. Yeah, that's Mad Max. What an ingenious name for a series, too. Mad Max is such a good name. I love how it's an alliteration, and both words have 3 letters. So simple. Does a perfect job explaining to the viewer what the movie's gonna be about before they even start watching or have any idea. It's about a guy named Max, and he's mad about something. Why is this dude so upset? I need to find out. It's also kind of strange to me that all of these movies are available on HBO Max. What makes it even funnier is that HBO was removed, so it's just called Max now. All of the Mad Max movies are available to watch on Max. You can't tell me they didn't do that on purpose. I mean, come on, dude. I'm convinced nobody on earth loves car chases in movies more than George Miller. He just can't get enough of it. It's been how long? 40 years? And he's still trying to make movies with awesome car chases. This guy, I bet George Miller loved the movie Titane. And if you've seen that movie, then you probably know why. These movies had such a huge impact on the cultural zeitgeist, and with every subsequent release, it's gotten stronger and more impactful. And you're gonna see this impact on a ton of stuff nowadays. Anyway, I was playing Fallout 2 after the show was released because I was in the Fallout mood. In the game, I purchased a leather jacket. I put it on and my character turned into Mad Max, and I'm not joking. You're literally just Max from Road Warrior. I've always wanted to make a video on the Mad Max movies, and I was like, oh my God, there's no better time than now. So I binged all the Mad Max movies, wrote a huge script, and I was brought back in time before the world was exposed to Mel Gibson's insane rants, and they are insane. I'm not joking, this guy, there's something wrong with him, all right?
But one person that no one will be upset about if we call him a prick is Mel Gibson.
I would also like to mention that the Mad Max video game that came out in 2015 is not bad at all. I actually really liked it. I went in with 0 expectations, and I ended up liking it so much that I 100%ed it. It's kind of rare that you get a game based on a movie that ends up being good, right? I'm going to die. Yeah, if you haven't played it, you should probably give it a shot. The first Mad Max movie was released in 1979. And of course, it was directed by George Miller, just like all the rest of them. Mel Gibson plays an Australian cop named Max in a post-apocalyptic setting. The budget for this movie was very low, so most of the extras were paid in beer, which is honestly hilarious. For those of you new Mad Max fans, this movie is a lot different than the newer ones. Instead of taking place in the desert, this one takes place in what looks to be grasslands. There's a scene on a beach, there's a scene in a forest. This is not the Mad Max that you're used to. The cops in this dystopic future are all into BDSM, I guess. It's just kind of weird, right? Why are they all wearing tight black leather clothing? It must get pretty hot in Australia. Max wears this leather clothing in all of the movies, and most of them take place in a desert. I don't know, it just probably wouldn't be my choice of clothes. The intro car chase is pretty great. I love the quick zooms into people's faces before they crash. It's become kind of an iconic George Miller filming technique. In the beginning of this movie, the cops are after this guy called the Night Rider. He's the leader of a gang and he loves to scream. He's probably on speed or something, but I don't know, whatever.
LeBron James.
Scream if you love drugs.
He outmaneuvers the cops only to find himself face to face with Max, who fearlessly drives directly at him. There's this half-second flash of Knight Rider's eyes before he crashes into a huge ball of flame. It's just brilliant. Near the end of the movie, the character Toe Cutter is riding on a motorcycle, and he hits an oncoming truck, and we get a very similar flash of his eyes. Max has these two weirdo car mechanic pals. They're in like one scene in the entire movie. Max approaches them and he's like, hey, how's this car coming along? And they're like, check it out, dude. This is the new Interceptor. It has one of the last V8s, or the last V8. This is the last V8 engine in existence, I suppose. And it's a very big deal. Like I mentioned before, the Knight Rider was once part of this cheesy biker gang. When we're introduced to them, they all park at the same time, and then they're all instructed to rev their engines at the same time before they start dancing in the street. They're a bit cringe, but you know, they're free. The leader, Toe Cutter, is missing an eyebrow, and he has a blonde streak only on the front of his bushy mane of hair. I'm not sure why they call him Toe Cutter, because I don't think there's a single scene of him cutting someone's toe. In order to show the viewer how ruthless this gang is, they chase this guy who's driving a red car, and they smack it with an axe, which sends the car spinning because it freaked out the driver so much. When this happens, the bikers are basically surrounding the car, but when the car spins out, the bikes just kind of vanish, and then they drive into frame a couple seconds later. It's kind of strange. When the car comes to a stop, the gang attacks it with miscellaneous things like axes and crowbars. I'm not sure why this guy isn't driving away. I guess the engine broke or something. These guys brutalized the car. They beat the shit out of this thing. Did they have to go that hard on the car? What did Ronald McDonald's whip ever do to them, you know? I find it kind of funny how this guy was being chased down by motorcycles when he was in a car. He could have just slammed on the brakes or swerved into them and they would crash and he wouldn't. It would be pretty easy for him to keep his car stable while also driving these guys off the road. Max has a goofy cop partner named Goose. Perhaps this character was inspiration for the Goose from Top Gun.
What's the film about? What's it really about? No, I don't fucking Boy Meets Girl. I don't give a shit about that. Fuck Boy Meets Girl. Fuck motorcycle movie. No, what is really being said? What's really being seen? They're gay. And they represent the gay man. She's heterosexuality. She's saying no. Go the normal way. And they're saying no, go the gay way. Be the gay way.
Half an hour into this movie, we see a couple riding the weirdest bike ever. The passenger has a half-cylinder windshield that's pulled down over her head, and her little head is sticking out of the seat, poking into the window. It's so silly looking. Her head looks like it's a little whack-a-mole. It's so dumb looking, and I desperately want to ride it. There's a scene when Goose gives someone a get-out-of-jail-free card, and I guess this was based off an on-set joke. Due to the limited budget of the movie, the biker gang in the movie was an actual biker gang called the Vigilantes, and they had to ride to the set each day in costume, and they would do this with their prop weapons. Can you imagine driving on the highway and seeing these guys ride past you in their motorcycles dressed up like this? Since the production company expected them to be pulled over by the police, each of them were given a letter explaining the film's peculiar requirements. This was done so if any police were to pull them over, they would understand why they were dressed so ridiculous and had weapons. The footage of the motorcycles and cars in this movie is sped up to make them appear like they're going faster than they are, but it's painfully noticeable. This next scene is very strange. We see some of the bike gang members molesting a mannequin of a naked woman on a beach. I have never seen someone this down bad in my life, and I'm on Twitter.
Pussy in bio.
Toe Cutter gets their attention by firing his shotgun off into the air, but he fires the gun directly next to his left ear, so he's deaf now. Like, he's just deaf. Or he should be, at least for the next 3 months.
Damn you, tinnitus! You're a cruel mistress!
This scene, among others, do a great job displaying how dysfunctional and mad these guys are. There's a scene of a character named Johnny the Boy waiting for some cops to leave. He's hiding out in his car. Once the cop leaves, he sits up and instantly burns the hair on his arm with a lighter? Okay, why did he do that? To show us that he's weird? Got it. Goose crashes his bike because he's riding too fast. He then has this guy pick him up and help him lift his bike into the truck. He then leaves this poor dude stranded in the middle of nowhere with nothing but a bicycle. Pretty rude, I must say. But it ends up working out for the guy on the bicycle because Goose is then ambushed by the gang and he crashes the truck too. The gang members then set him on fire. He isn't given a merciful death. Instead, he's kept alive. And we can see by his arm that his entire body now resembles a hot dog that was left on the grill for too long. That's quite an impressive string of L's, Goose. Max is upset about what happened to Goose, so he quits the force and spends quality time with his wife and child. But they don't show us that he has a child until much later. It's very awkward. Let's play a game. What do you guys think Max and Jesse named their kid? Guess one of these 4 options. Go. If you chose option D, then you're wrong. It's C, Sprog. Why'd they name their kid Sprog? Come here, little Sproggy. Like, what the? That's like something I would name my orc character in Skyrim. Also, I know I already mentioned this, but where the hell did this baby come from? When Max and Jesse first take off on their vacation, it's just the two of them and no child. There's no baby anywhere to be seen when they're on the beach initially. The baby first appears at the junkyard when Jesse tells Max that she's going to buy an ice cream cone. I think all of you know where this movie is headed if you've seen Gladiator. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Gladiator was inspired by this movie. The gang finds Jesse and their kid, and this is what they say.
Look what's turned up for Sunday dinner.
Main course and dessert.
Twitter incels whenever they see an OnlyFans thirst trap. She's able to escape the gang. For now. Jessie decides to enjoy the beach by herself. Eventually, she finds herself running from the gang in the forest. And then a couple of pigeons fly up at her out of nowhere, like in the middle of the woods. Why are these pigeons hanging out in the woods? Do they do that? After exiting the farmhouse looking for her son, Jessie encounters the motorcycle gang at the garage of the farmhouse. However, the property is enclosed by a fence, and the gate to the driveway is locked. Also, nobody heard the motorcycles drive up to the farmhouse, yet somehow the gang was able to sneak onto the property with their motorcycles without anyone hearing their approach? Something's not adding up. There's definitely real chemistry between Max and his wife Jessie in this movie. They're romantic and silly with one another like any real loving relationship. Mel Gibson and Joanne Samuel sell it pretty well, which makes what happens later all the better. The gang ends up stealing their dear baby Sprog, and Jessie runs into them. Toe Cutter removes his helmet to reveal an incredible Cindy Lou Who hairstyle. This granny comes out of nowhere with a gun and helps Jessie escape with Sprog. Not too long afterward, they're run down on the street and killed. No idea why she decided to run on the road instead of, you know, anywhere else that the bikes would have a tough time driving on. But, you know, you do you, girl. Also, how did they kill Sprog as well? You know what I mean? Like, maybe they drove past and cut Jessie. Perhaps that might kill her. But Sprog, he just took a little bit of a tumble on the ground, right? Like, she was holding him. Are you telling me one of the people driving past used their VAT system or something and aimed at the kid? Just zoned in on it and smacked it. Pretty impressive. Max is very upset. Obviously. Max has had enough. Why do these guys keep going around and killing the people I like? Not cool, man. So he suits up and takes the souped up interceptor from earlier. He's out for revenge. Max is mad. I gotta say the vehicle stunts in this movie are pretty cool, especially with the budget that they had. Some of the stunts presented in this movie are pretty impressive. Max drives some bikers off a bridge into a river, and the bikers literally fall into the water below. Hopefully they didn't need multiple takes, and the biker gang that was hired for this movie, I guess they just didn't care that much about their bikes. Max is faced with the biker gang, and they fuck him up. They shoot him through his leg and then run over his arm with a motorcycle. Toe Cutter is riding a motorcycle too, and he's being chased by Max. Max is on his heels, like right next to him, speeding down the highway. Eventually, Toe Cutter hits an oncoming truck, and his eyes bulge out of his skull. When this happens though, Max's car is directly behind the bike, but his car vanishes just before the crash. Where'd he go? I guess he hit on the brakes. But how do you see the truck coming in time? I don't know, man. If you have a car and a bike both going like 180 miles an hour, and then there's an oncoming truck, I don't think the car would be able to stop in time either. You know what I mean? Later, Max turns into Jigsaw and handcuffs Johnny the Boy's ankle to a truck that's bleeding fuel. He then gives him a saw with the option to either hack through the cuffs or his ankle, but he has very limited time until the truck explodes because Max set up a little like trap with a lighter. Of course, Johnny the Boy doesn't cut his ankle, so he blows up. Tim Burns, the man who acted as Johnny the Boy, was so into character that he annoyed everybody on set. So much so that he was abandoned one day during lunch while handcuffed to the wreck. George Miller raised the money for the first Mad Max movie by working as an emergency room doctor. I love the fact that the first Mad Max movie was a passion project by some random doctor that ended up becoming a world-renowned director who is now releasing one of the biggest blockbusters of 2024.
Nope, scratch that.
That's craziness. 3 years later, Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior was released. Much like the first one, this one starts with a car chase and destruction. Car chases and big booms are just staples of the Mad Max universe. This scene does a good job showing us how sought after fuel is in this decrepit world. Also, Max just looks cool as fuck in this movie. Although I have to say, dressing in full black leather in the desert must result in the worst swamp ass in existence. Max must be a smelly boy. I mean, he looks pretty cool. You can't deny that. Just don't come close to him, because then you'll get a flashback of attending that one Smash Bros tournament. Holy shit. I do like that they gave him this little leg support system to help with his injury from the end of the first movie. He meets this mad gooner who claims he knows where he can find a shit ton of gas. Max ties him up in his passenger seat with his shotgun aimed at his head. They eventually make their way to Burning Man. Yeah, there's this encampment in the middle of the desert that produces a shit ton of fuel. They're shooting flames everywhere. Max has a sweet little doggy in this movie who he shares food with. Well, the dog shares food with Max. They eat dog food. So clearly food is a scarcity as well. I would expect water to also be a scarcity since they're in the desert in a post-apocalyptic setting. But for some reason, nobody ever cares to think about water. Like, everybody just has water. Where did they get it? I don't know. It's different, okay? But I kind of like it. It's like this weird twist on the post-apocalyptic setting. Like, everybody just has their basic necessities met for some reason, except for gas. Like, gas is... They need fuel more than anything in the world. These guys are fanatics. That's the reason they're alive, right? Their purpose is to get more fuel to make their cars go fast. Without fuel, me angry. The dog used in the film doesn't have a name, it's just named Dog, and it was obtained from a local dog pound and trained to perform in the film. Apparently the sound of the car engines upset him so much that he was fitted with special earplugs, and after filming was complete, he was adopted by one of the camera operators. So Max and this goober stake out Burning Man until they find that a gang outside of this encampment are committing horrible acts on a poor couple. They kind of just watch as it happens. I'm not blaming them. They're only two guys. What could they do, you know? Max is able to run down and save the guy, for now. He uses him to get inside the encampment so he can get some fuel. It doesn't help that Max is wearing all black, and the evil gang in this movie wears mostly dark clothes, while the people in this encampment wear a bunch of white. They let Max in, but the guy dies anyway, and they obviously don't trust Max, but they let him chill in their encampment anyway. The evil gang shows up, and among them is this guy with a red mohawk. He also has shoulder pads with feathers on them. It's very stylish. We then meet the leader of the gang, a shirtless bodybuilder with a mask named Humongous.
Humongous what? Humongous what?
Apparently this guy was at one point meant to be Goose, but his body is not burned enough for that to make sense, even with his burnt face hidden by a mask. And if this is the case, then Goose must be on some steroids or something, because I don't know, man, their bodies just don't look similar to me. Getting burnt up in that car made him really want to do some push-ups. Humongous and his gang threaten to overtake the encampment. He tells them that they have one day to either surrender or fight and die to defend their gas. Oh yeah, there's this random wolf kid who has a sharp boomerang. He chops off this guy's fingers with it, and after his fingers get chopped off, he smiles about it. Like, this is real chill, man. I love having a useless hand now. I know it's meant to show us that
they're kind of insane, you know.
Max ends up building some rapport with this kid. He shows him a music box that he found earlier. The goober dude that Max met earlier takes a liking to an underage blonde girl in this encampment, and he almost convinces her to fly away with him on his gyrocopter. So weird. Which leads me to think, hey, well, you're telling me this guy has a gyrocopter that can carry at least 1 to 3 people, I think. Granted, it would take a long time, but why didn't they just fly them 2 by 2 to a different location? If they have all this fuel to spare, that'd be a good way to bring them to safety so they don't have to fight for their lives against this gang. Granted, the gang could always just follow the gyrocopter, but this thing is used later in the movie and they don't do it then, so I don't know. It just seems like a really good way to bring things in and out of the camp safely. You know, like at least get the women and children out of there with this gyrocopter. I don't know where they would go. They're kind of in the middle of nowhere. Max found this big truck earlier in the movie, and he strikes a deal with the people of this encampment. He's like, hey, give me some of your gas, and I'm gonna sneak over to this truck, fill it up, and then drive to the encampment. Everything's gonna work out fine, and we can use this truck to drive away with all the fuel, so they can't take any of it. I can think of a couple reasons this plan won't work. But for some reason, the people of this encampment are like, you know what? Let's give it a shot. I know they don't care about Max all that much, like whatever, who is this guy? Fine, if he wants to risk his life, let him do it. But I'm sure Max could think of some better way to go about doing this. Also, Max is carrying these 4 metal cans filled with gas, but it's pretty obvious that they're empty by the way he carries them with ease. He ends up using the gyrocopter goober to fly him to the truck. He fills up the truck with gas and drives away. After a short skirmish involving Max in the truck, the gyrocopter, and the gang, Max ends up back at the encampment with the rig safely. The truck is fucked, so they have to fix it and hold out in the meantime. This gang had been collecting hostages from this encampment, I guess. So Lord Humongous's men strings up these hostages and burn them alive for their friends and family to see. Max could give a shit. He did his part, he got his gas, so he's chilling. They try and convince Max to help them, but he's stubborn and refuses and drives away. Like he thought he could just drive away safely for some reason. When Humongous and his entire gang are hanging out right outside of this encampment, they're kind of blocking the road. So I'm not sure what Max was thinking. I mean, he could have tried to drive around the gang and get to the road that way, you know? Like drive south, I'm not sure if they're north or whatever, but drive the opposite way and then make a huge circle around the gang and get to the road and then drive away, you know? Instead, Max tries to drive through the gang. He just likes to make things harder for himself. So the gang obviously chases after him and it results in him flipping his car into a ditch. So that worked out well. One of the gang members shoots his dog with a crossbow, which makes this movie officially the worst Mad Max movie. Like if I thought this movie was a 7 out of 10, the moment you kill a dog, it goes down to a 2. I'm sorry. That's just how it is, okay? Max set up this booby trap in his car just in case anybody tried to loot it. One of the gang members tries to go into his car, so it sets it off and it blows up. Max is injured behind a rock, and the other goons decide to drive away after the explosion. They probably think Max is dead because they probably expected him to be in the car. His goober friend rescues him by picking him up in his gyrocopter and bringing him to safety. As if the gang wouldn't see and hear this thing flying in, you'd think they would follow it to see where it was going, but they don't for some reason. So now Max is back at the encampment and he's forced to help these people. So he drives the tanker for them. They break through the gang with relative ease. The goober agrees to help them, so he drops Molotovs on them from his gyrocopter. Humongous has this revolver with a massive scope on it, because of course he does. And he shoots at the goober in the copter, and the edit here is amazing. He lunges forward before going, "Oh shit!" Gang members enter the vacated encampment, only for a trap to go off, killing them all and destroying everything. So now we've got a Fury Road sequence, the gang versus the good guys, driving down this seemingly endless stretch of road. These dumbasses throw a grapple hook onto the end of the tanker, and it sends their car flipping through the air. They didn't think that through very well, did they? There's this hot girl that had like one interaction with Max earlier, and she gets shot by bolts and dies. It's a very sad moment, you can tell, because she's a hot girl, and whenever hot girls die in movies, it's sad. They played sad music during this part. Needless to say, I broke down in tears. One of the funniest and craziest stunts in the film, in which one of the motorcycle riders hits a car and flies off the bike, smashes his leg against the car, and cartwheels through the air towards the camera, was actually a genuine and near fatal accident that they just happened to catch on film. The stuntman was supposed to just fly over the car without hitting it. He survived the stunt, but his leg was broken. The moment looked so dramatic and silly that it was kept in the movie. The red mohawk Birdman guy ends up on the front of the tanker, and eventually the tanker drives directly into Humongous. Like they drive into each other. I'm not sure what Humongous was thinking. I love how dumb everybody is in these movies. I hope they got the truck crashing on their first take, because lifting that truck and filming this over and over probably wouldn't be very possible without damaging the truck. After the tanker crashes, the remaining barbarians turn and leave, but they were several hundred yards away from the crash site, and for some reason they abandon it when this tanker could be full of gas? Like, what? Isn't that the whole reason they were trying to raid the encampment? It turns out the tanker is actually full of sand, and it was used as a diversion for the other people who actually left with the real gas that they hid away in their cars. If these guys knew that the tanker was full of sand, they wouldn't have bothered chasing it. Well, maybe they would have. They definitely chased Max earlier for seemingly no reason. Well, no, the Mohawk guy doesn't like Max. He hates him, so he wants him dead. The goober guy was shot out of the sky, but his gyrocopter lands perfectly and doesn't harm him, and it still works, I guess. So he rides to pick up Max.
Hello there.
This goober dude now leads the caravan on their journey north, and he gets to live a long, happy life with the underage girl. Drake would love this movie. Max decides, no, I'm not going with you guys, but have fun and good luck. I'll be fine. My car is destroyed. I have no means to defend myself, no water, no food. My dog's dead. I already ate my dog food. I guess I could just eat the dead raiders. That might sustain me for a little bit. They might have some water on them. I could probably take one of their cars too. One of their busted ass cars. In 1985, we got the third installment, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
Here we go again.
This is the last Mad Max movie to star Mel Gibson. It also stars Tina Turner. Tina Turner's character is named Auntie Entity, and she wears a steel mail dress that weighed more than 121 pounds, 55 kilos. That must have sucked to wear. Also, not once does anybody in the movie call her Auntie Entity. That's weird. Everybody just calls her Auntie.
Auntie.
Auntie!
Auntie!
So I'm not sure why they named these characters if the name is never used. The film takes place 15 years after the previous film, which makes this film take place 20 years after the first film. So if Max was 28 in the first film, he would be 48 in this film. And he doesn't really look 48.
Motherfucker, you look 30.
He looks 33, but with graying hair.
And you are an old man and a fool!
I don't know, man. It's whatever. This movie starts pretty silly. Goober's in this movie too, and his kid is flying a plane, which by itself is absurd.
What the fuck?
And his kid drops off Goober mid-flight without any trouble. I know these movies don't care that much about realism, but come on, man. There's this pack of camels headed for some undisclosed location. We see Max, and he has much longer hair now, but he made sure to cut his beard short. So he kind of looks like Jesus. He's got the weirdest mullet ever. Like he just cut the front short, but he kept everything else long. I'm guessing just so he could see better, but still, I'm not a barber either, but you could do better than that. It's like the opposite of a fuckboy broccoli haircut. He travels to a place called Bartertown. He tells them that he's searching for someone who is with a pack of camels.
He was driving a team of camels.
So obviously that's probably Goober. I don't know who else it would be. Maybe the kid, like the wildling kid from the second movie. They never tell us why he's searching for him though. He's just searching for him for some reason, and then he gets wrapped up in all this bullshit, and then at the very end of the movie he meets them again, and then the movie ends, and it's like, why were you searching for them? Because you were bored? Is that why? You would think that he would just travel with them at the end of the second movie. I'm confused, okay? There's this pretty iconic scene of Max dropping off his weapons before entering Bartertown, and he stacks a giant pile of miscellaneous bullshit. When he's giving up his weapons, he gives up Wes's wrist crossbow from Mad Max 2, which he probably retrieved after Wes was killed by the truck. Bartertown is pretty neat. It's got this tribal vibe. Mohawks and shoulder pads are very much still in fashion. We meet Tina Turner's character Auntie. They hold an audition for Max, where they basically just try and kill him, and if he survives, then he's hired. I mean, that's a great way to kill off your men if this guy's at all competent. Auntie has this goon named Iron Bar. This is what he looks like. He has this weird like Asian head behind him to make him appear taller because he's very insecure about being short.
Oh, look at the little baby.
And there's a very awkward moment between him and Max during this scene. Let go of the pole, dude. I love how Max hit a blade in a fly swatter. Thickest and heaviest fly swatter known to man. So obviously he ends up passing the audition. Auntie tells Max that they'll help him if he agrees to help her kill someone. Also, Max's eyes are different. The pupil in his left eye is permanently dilated. This is a nod to Mad Max 2, when his car is forced off the road by Wes, and Max crashes. When Max crashes, he suffers a severe injury to his left eye. The disparity between his eyes is easier to see in close-ups. It's kind of crazy that they would go so in detail with things like this and then care so little about realism. But anyway, we learn that Bartertown is literally run on the methane produced by pig shit. It's like the most Mad Max thing I've ever heard.
Bullshit. Pig shit.
So they've got this massive drift of pigs in an underground facility called the Underworld. We're then introduced to Master Blaster. It kind of sounds like a gamer tag someone made when they were 13. I'm Master Blaster.
You gotta call me that. You gotta call me Master.
That's weird, dude. Why'd you name yourself that?
I'm gonna blast your mom later.
Master Blaster is actually 2 people. There's a dwarf mounted on this big guy's back. The dwarf is Master, and the big guy with the mask is Blaster, and they act as a unit. I love how goofy it is. Auntie wants Blaster dead, but she wants Master left alive. Max is told that Blaster can beat most men with just his breath. It would have been fun for them to show us why he got this reputation, but they never do. When his mask comes off later in the movie, they should have just had him say something, and then Max like lean over because he didn't hear him, and then he repeats himself, and then Max is like repelled by his breath, you know? But they never do anything with it. There's something so unique and fun about George Miller's post-apocalyptic world. The characters all have these weird, goofy names, and then there's Max, who has a completely normal name.
You're a basic bitch.
This world is full of psychos. It's super chaotic and insane, and Max is forced to navigate this ridiculous reality. When we meet Master Blaster, I was expecting Master to be intelligent, while Blaster was the dumb muscle. But Master is anything but intelligent. Just listen to how he speaks.
No trade. Do me order. Me master.
Max learns very quickly that Blaster is sensitive to loud, sharp noises, like a whistle. So he plans to use this against him later. Max is instructed to start a dispute with Master Blaster, so they can begin a lawful fight to the death in an arena called the Thunderdome. The idea of the arena is really fun. The 2 fighters are attached to these bungee cords, and they bounce around this domed cage that has spikes on the inside and various weapons attached to its walls for the combatants to use against each other. And in a ridiculous frenzy, they try to kill one another. Max gets his ass beat, of course. This fight kind of reminds me of the fight in Gladiator between Maximus and the undefeated champion with the lion helmet. In both cases, the main character is faced against someone who is much larger than them. They're stronger than them, they have a helmet on and no shirt, and there's things put into the fight to determine the outcome. Eventually, Max knocks his helmet off and reveals a Down syndrome kid, so he refuses to kill him. Auntie is not having it. Max busted the deal, so he's gotta face the wheel. So he's instructed to turn this wheel to seal his fate. There's a lot of different punishments on this wheel, like life imprisonment, death, etc. Max is placed on a horse with his hands tied behind his back and sent into the desert with a goofy mask on his head. Earlier in the movie, Max made a friend in the underworld without really trying. Max's luck stat is so weird. He'll survive these insane circumstances only to have his ass beat later on. So this guy who likes Max decides to save Max's life by sending a monkey out into the desert with some water. And the monkey finds Max with the water. So Max is able to drink it and walk back. But he doesn't walk back all the way. He collapses anyway. Again, is this monkey immortal? It must be.
That just makes no fucking sense.
A horse rides out into the desert until it's tired enough to lay down and die. A monkey chases after this horse and is able to reach it without dying? Maybe the monkey was taking some sips of water on the way, but I mean, come on, dude, really? Also, how did the monkey know where to go? Did it follow the horse prints or something? Like, a monkey could not make it as far as a horse in the desert, even if it had a big thing of water on its back. Like, it's dragging this water through the desert. Whatever, dude, I'm done. Max's luck stat is working overtime again. He's rescued by a random woman in the night named Savannah. She's part of a tribe, and I guess she mistook him for someone named Captain Walker.
It's Captain Walker.
So they take him back to their village. They cut his hair as he sleeps, and he wakes up to these animalistic kids chanting at him. They kind of remind me of the Lost Boys in Peter Pan. Like, this tribe exists somewhere in the region, right? There's trees and flowing water and what?
I haven't a clue what's going on here, but I'll act like I do.
Like, you'd assume if people knew about this place, there'd be a lot of people there. You know, there'd be competition around that area. Everybody would want to be there. You know what I mean? Like, that's how you sustain yourself. You want to be around the water. Of course, Bartertown is in the middle of the desert. They didn't search around the area very well. And it's not like they're miles and miles and miles away. Like, they walk back and forth between this oasis. Oh, I'm sorry, it's hidden. It's deep down there. No one knew about it except for this tribe of people. You would assume that Max would want to stay here, right? Like, he would want to make friends with these people chill, I'm gonna hang out. This is a great place to be, lots of water. You can just hang out here forever. He doesn't do that. Who cares if they think you're Captain Walker? Just say you are, you know? Yes, that is me. I am Captain Walker, I'm your leader. I will hang out here as your king forever. We learn more about this legendary Captain Walker. It turns out he was this random pilot that crash landed here many years ago. Apparently some people survived the crash, and Captain Walker helped them survive many years in this area. Eventually they bring Max to the plane wreck as if he's gonna fly them away or something. It's like this Captain Walker is their Jesus. Max is like, God damn it. I was given a perfect place to live on a platter when I was out in the middle of the desert dying, but I'm not gonna accept this. You know what Max wants to do? He wants to save Master because he felt bad after kicking the shit out of his Down syndrome friend. It's so weird, man. There was this power struggle between Auntie and Master Blaster, so Auntie just wanted him taken out of the picture, but Auntie still wants to use Master because apparently he's very smart and they can use him to get information or something. Yeah, he's very smart. Just listen to the way he speaks. He's very intelligent.
Us suffer bad. Us want justice.
So Max is hanging out in this village again with his immortal monkey. I like this little tribe of people and the broken English language that they've created for themselves.
In here, this is jerkin time.
What do you mean by that? Savannah isn't listening to Max. Max shoots his gun and then Savannah throws a spear at him. So he's like, all right, bitch, come here. And he lays her out like, what the fuck? Bruh. This guy literally punched this girl so hard, her brains were knocked loose from her skull. What's love got to do? Got to do with it. Max is informed by one of the kids that someone ventured out into the desert. After saving them, they all end up in Bartertown because they have to save Master. It's so weird. Like, why do they give a fuck about this guy? I mean, come on, is this really the same Max from the earlier movies who couldn't give a fuck about anybody? I love the old school movie magic at the end of this movie with the train and the explosions and dust. There's sparks and flames everywhere. With the help of the tribespeople, Max is able to overthrow the underworld and save Master. And they ride away in a train. Obviously, Auntie doesn't want them leaving with Master, so they chase after them. Watching Iron Bar chase them on the train track with that goofy head and hair attached to his back is so funny. We get a car chase sequence that we've come to expect from these movies, and it's pretty fun just like the others. It's extremely dusty with some satisfying crashes and explosions. Eventually, Iron Bar ends up on the front of the train as it's speeding ahead. How come these bad guys always end up on the front of whatever Max is driving? Master is now dressed in a new dapper uniform. I love his little hat and glasses.
Splendid.
He cleans up pretty well. Auntie is desperate to get Master back, so desperate that she travels along to do it herself. Earlier in the movie, they tried to use him for information, but he was uncooperative, so they left him in the pig pen to rot. He was practically of no use to them anyway. Why are they so desperate to get him back? It makes no sense. And didn't Auntie want full control over Bartertown anyway? Shouldn't she want him gone? Like, what? There's a silly part where Max picks up Master and carries him from one part of the train to the next. With him under his arm like a bag of luggage, Iron Bar ends up dying by falling off an iron bar. JK, this guy's immortal, just like the monkey. He's been killed like 10 times so far. But he just keeps coming back. This guy's like a cat. I love the look of the vehicles in this movie. They have these like post-apocalyptic silly designs about them. They're like the car versions of the pipe guns from Fallout. The good guys meet back up with Goober because apparently they were camped out at the end of this train track. It's very convenient. So they end up using his plane. I guess Goober saw a dentist between this movie and the last one because look at those sparkling white chompers, man. Very impressive. Iron Bar drives directly at another car and then screams when they collide, like he didn't expect that to happen or something. Max was used as a distraction so the plane could take off, which allowed the good guys to leave safely. This is very similar to the end of the second movie, where he did practically the same thing.
That was the last we ever saw of him.
Iron Bar manages one last middle finger before dying. Max is now at Auntie's mercy. She decides to leave him there because she's impressed by him or something. This is the same guy who blew up your town and murdered some of your men. But the people in this world aren't exactly sane, so it's not a huge deal. Also, Goober has the name Jedediah when he was nameless in the previous movie. Unsure why they would name him here when I don't remember them saying his name once. Apparently the sandstorm at the end of this movie was real, and a camera plane flew into it for some shots. The storm in its entirety hit the crew in the desert, forcing them to escape it in their cars. Goober and the good guys fly through the ruins of Australia, where they start a new society. I was so confused when I never heard someone say,
"Welcome to the Thunderdome, bitch."
But then I remembered that that was from the movie Waiting, and Dane Cook said it.
"Welcome to Thunderdome, bitch."
It's weird that our brains force us to misremember things like that. Anyway, let's talk about Fury Road.
Let's get to it!
Mad Max would return in 2015 with Mad Max Fury Road. It released with widespread critical acclaim. Tom Hardy, Charlize Theron, and Nicholas Hoult all star in this movie. Hugh Keys-Byrne, the actor that played Toe Cutter in the original Mad Max, returns in this movie to play Immortan Joe. I think that's pretty neat. This movie is significantly more orange than the others. In fact, George said that he wanted this movie to be more colorful because he didn't want to match the typical post-apocalyptic setting with like bleak grays and dark colors. He wanted this movie to pop, and pop it does.
There were a lot of dystopian stories, and the basic instinct was to desaturate it. So that was a big influence on the look of Fury Road.
I'm also a huge fan of this movie despite how pedantic I might be in this video. I will be mentioning some illogical, silly stuff that I noticed while watching, but don't let that take away from how incredible this movie is. Every single movie has flaws, including this one, but that doesn't mean it's not a masterpiece. It's a miracle this movie exists in the first place. This movie is badass. It's creative, it's super fun, it's one of the most adrenaline-pumping cinematic experiences I've ever seen. The music fits the movie perfectly. It enhances the experience 100-fold. I wouldn't be surprised if some old person who was a fan of Mad Max died of a heart attack while watching this. I hope that never happened, but I'm just saying, this movie's kind of insane. The action sequences are incredible and beautifully choreographed. The camera work is ridiculous in this movie. There's a million examples, but one in particular that I'd like to mention is a shot of Immortan Joe and his war party driving towards the camera. The camera drops down and then falls to the ground so all of the cars can drive over it. Just like in the previous movies, the characters in this one have incredible names. Let's see, we've got Rictus Erectus, Nux, Slit, the Splendid Angarad, Immortan Joe, Cheeto the Fragile, the Doof Warrior, Corpus Colossus, Glory the Child, the Organic Mechanic, and then there's Max. It must have been such a bitch to make this movie. In fact, I know it was. There are many first-hand accounts of how annoying this movie was to make. It doesn't sound like a pleasant experience.
We didn't breathe for 8 months making this film.
They spent 7 months straight in the desert, driving around non-stop, essentially shooting an entire movie in motion, with sand constantly blowing in their face under the hot sun. Some moron at the 2015 Cannes conference asked Tom a question along the lines of, "Hey Tom, did you ever think it was weird shooting this man movie with so many women?
Why are all these women in here? I thought this was supposed to be a man's movie."
That must have been really weird, right? There's just too many women in this men's movie.
Did you ever think,
I thought this was a man's movie? Get these women out of here, am I right? And then Tom simply responds,
"No."
Apparently, Charlize Theron and George Miller didn't get along with Tom Hardy during filming. They said that he had a threatening vibe and he was kind of a hard ass.
Actually don't know what, if there was one issue, I just think it was like they weren't vibing.
Apparently there was one instance where Charlize and Tom screamed at each other. Tom has since apologized to both of them for his bad behavior.
I have to apologize to you because I got frustrated.
Tom has said that he felt in over his head with the movie. While on set, he felt like the movie was overcomplicated and ridiculously meticulous. Afterwards, he owned up to being wrong about all that when the movie was released. I can't help but think like the beef between Tom and Charlize might have made the movie better because the characters they play are definitely at odds with one another. In fact, they try to kill each other during their first scene together. And it's kind of funny thinking about how these two people didn't like each other on set. And most of their scenes when they're speaking to each other are mostly filled with very short small talk.
But they speak only when it's necessary.
And Max almost always sounds pissed.
Go back for her!
No.
So it might have just worked out for Tom. Something that George Miller said about Fury Road that I love was that he saw its creation as visual music. Every frame is a note and they all need to work together harmoniously to create a beautiful song.
I call it visual music. If a note was slightly off, we hear it. as Hitchcock said, they don't have to read the subtitles in Japan.
In the beginning of this movie, Max eats a two-headed lizard before getting his car fucked up and stolen by some war boys. The jacket worn by Tom Hardy in this movie is a replica of the same jacket worn by Mel Gibson in the last two movies of the original trilogy. Max's long hair and beard tell us that he's been on the road for quite a while before this happened, but this time he didn't cut just the front of it, you know, to give himself this ridiculous appearance. Also, remember how I spoke about the speeding up of vehicles in the previous movies? Well, they do the same thing in this movie. They don't just speed up the vehicles, they speed up Max's running through these hallways in the beginning of the movie. I think it works though. While it's still noticeable, it gives the film this urgent sense of franticity and chaos. Throughout the movie, Max has flashbacks of some horrible thing that happened in his past. And throughout most of them, there's this young girl, and apparently Max failed to save her. So he feels extremely guilty about that. And she's constantly there in his head haunting him throughout the movie. It's never explicitly told to us whether or not Max failed to save this girl or just left her to die. It could be either or. I love how the war boys are covered in white powder with black face paint. I'm guessing Immortan Joe looks this way due to inbreeding, but I'm not sure. Either that or he has some sort of disease. Let's just say he looks disgusting. There's something wrong with this guy. His flesh is gross, and he needs to wear a face mask to breathe. And his sons aren't too normal either.
Let me see. I want to see.
I love how his war boys chant V8 while holding up their arms and hands in a V sign. These people worship engines and cars, and gasoline is more important to them than water.
By my deeds, I honor him. V8.
I love how ridiculous and insane it is that Joe has these 3 gigantic pipes that have openings on the side of this plateau, and each of them gush a shit ton of water. Like, thank you, random water that appears from out of nowhere in the middle of the desert. One of Joe's wives explains later in the movie that they pump it up from deep in the earth.
Where does the water come from?
He pumps it up from deep in the earth.
And I guess waste all of it, because most of the water that they spray down at the people below is just wasted and absorbed into the ground before people can use it. Also, that's a shit ton of water to find underground in one area. Must be a pretty impressive aquifer.
Yes.
Also, apparently there's a green oasis atop this plateau. I'm not sure if this is realistic, but I'll give it to the movie. Also, I love Furiosa. Her name is so cool, and I love the way that they designed her character. Short hair, black forehead, prosthetic arm. It's just a cool combo, okay? It's like George Miller and his team sat down and tried to think of a female character that could rival Max with cool points. A seemingly impossible task that they managed to pull off. Unreal.
This may be the first film where an action hero is one-armed. Was that from the beginning?
If I answer that, it was in the very first storyboards.
This movie is lightning in a bottle, I swear. Furiosa has a plan to save Immortan Joe's wives, who he keeps locked away in a vault. They never show us how she got them out of this vault, because in the beginning of the movie, she already has all these women stowed away in her war rig. They never show us how she got them out, but she somehow achieved this ridiculous feat off screen. And she left an old woman behind for some reason. Why not take her too? Maybe this old lady's plan was to kill Joe once he entered, since she is armed with a shotgun. Where did she get that shotgun? I'm guessing Furiosa gave it to her before departing. I'm unsure how Furiosa could have stolen all these women from Joe without him noticing. It's not like this vault has a secret entry or something. There's one exit and everybody is standing directly outside of it, so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Joe is not happy with Furiosa stealing his prime breeders, so he has his war boys go out on the road to fetch them. One of the war boys attaches Max to the hood of his car as a blood bag, since I guess he's ill and can't go to war, and Max's high-octane blood will keep him strong on the road. At least this is what they say. It's probably a bunch of bullshit, but they're all high on drugs, so whatever, dude.
High-octane crazy blood filling me up.
They all desperately want to get to Valhalla, but of course the origins of what exactly Valhalla is to these guys has probably been warped over time. Now we get the most insane car chase in existence. There's flamethrowers spewing fire from behind cars. There's this guy all in red playing electric guitar on top of this insane looking truck with these giant speakers behind him. And of course his guitar also spews flame. This guitarist is Australian artist Sean Hape, better known as Iota. He said the guitar weighed 132 pounds and actually shot flame. That's insane. And I love that actually exists. And then there's a group of guys playing huge drums on the back of this truck. George Miller had said that it was important to him that they played music because it wasn't very uncommon for people to play music when they went into war. The war boy that claimed Max as his blood bag is named Nux. And there's a scene when Nux speeds ahead. And when he does this, Max says, "Confucamus." And I was kind of confused. So I went online and Googled what on earth he could have meant by this. One person said it's Latin for "we are fucked." Some other people claim it's wasteland slang for confused and fucked up person. Like Max is calling Nux this. And I wouldn't be very surprised by this because later in the movie, one character calls another character crazy.
He's coming crazy!
Like kamikaze, but also crazy. Their language is like this weird wasteland twisted version of English. Furiosa once worked for Joe, and she was a leader of one of his small war parties. In the beginning of this movie, she has a mission to go to Gastown, but she deviates from this objective in order to save the women that she has hidden away in the truck, making it super obvious to Joe that she betrayed him. Why wouldn't she just drive in the direction of Gastown until she was out of eyesight, and then change direction? Don't immediately deviate from your original objective when Joe and his sons can easily see the truck. She must have known that they could see where she was driving. She has a bunch of war boys with her who are all confused why she isn't driving toward Gastown. And her second in command repeatedly asks her why she's not driving toward Gastown. And she has to keep coming up with all these excuses.
It's a detour.
I guess the people in Gastown are also evil, so she doesn't want to go there. You'll see that goon platoon later. Also, she ends up running into buzzards and their traps on this new path. They attempt to plunder them. The buzzards are pretty cool. All of their cars have tons of spikes all over them. The buzzards have a weapon of choice. They like using saws, blades, and spikes, while the war boys like using explosive spears and flamethrowers. It makes for a pretty fun chase sequence, one of many in this movie. Also, why would the buzzards try and plunder Furiosa's war rig when not too far behind her is a Morton Joe and his entire war party of like 50 other vehicles? Even if they were successful, they would be quickly wiped out by a Morton Joe and his war party. It makes no sense unless they just didn't see them or, you know, hear them. Those guitars and the drums, all those engines. I don't know, dude. I do think it's kind of strange to reduce Max to a hood ornament in the first act of this movie. It is pretty funny though. And he does get quite a bit of action when he's done, you know, being a hood ornament. Somehow Nux's car is faster than any of the other cars in a Morton Joe's war party because he manages to reach Furiosa much faster than the rest of the group. How come this random dying guy has the fastest car? And it's got a human being on the front of it, like weighing it down in the most awkward spot. It would have been better if Nux was using Max's car, because then you could explain it away like, oh my God, Max's car is just faster than the rest of these people. But he isn't using Max's car. So I'm just sat here like, what? Okay, this guy, he's just much faster than the rest. Although that might not make sense either, because in the beginning of the movie, he's definitely not outrunning these guys in his car. Whatever. The amount of explosions in these car chases is absurd. It's just like every 3 seconds there's something blowing up, and I love it. It's like a Michael Bay movie, but on crack. When Furiosa is approaching a gigantic sandstorm, one of the war boys yells, "Fang it!" Like fang it. But when I first saw this movie, I thought he screamed, you know, "Fang it! Fang it!" The slur, and I was so confused. Once again, I am forever grateful for subtitles. When they enter the sandstorm, there's lightning and tornadoes within it. It looks like quite the nightmare to drive through, although it does look pretty cool. Furiosa uses her truck to nudge a car into one of the twisters. So she uses her car to nudge another car, like directly next to her, into a tornado. But her war rig is fine. I know it weighs a lot more, but really? Look at how big this tornado is. I'm sorry, but there isn't a reality where this truck wouldn't have at least flipped over. Also, a supercharger or turbocharger without an air filter would be destroyed within minutes in a storm like this. We see these engines operating at full throttle in the middle of this massive dust storm, ingesting a huge amount of dirt. But for some reason, none of the engines ever fail from this. In this universe, the engines must just work differently. I'll accept that. Or maybe they found a workaround, you know? They have like the most most advanced air filter. In this sandstorm, Nux attempts to detonate his car using gas and a flare. Like, he spills gasoline throughout the interior of the car and then lights a flare directly above it. But then Max stops him from dropping it. I'm not a scientist, but I don't think that would matter. The sparks from the flare would be more than enough to ignite the gas, even from that distance. As soon as Nux lit this flare, the car would explode. It's not even up for debate. That would have happened. But no, Max saved the day. This gasoline is not nearly as just kidding, it is. Look at how the cars explode in this universe. And then something even more insane happens. Watch what happens to Nux's car while Max and Nux are still in it. There's a short time skip, the storm passes, and Max is unharmed, and he's just hanging out in a big pile of sand. All right, so we already knew Max's luck stat was through the roof. His build is a bit broken, let's just say that. This dude, he always survives. Surely Nux is dead, right? No, he's fine too. Yeah, neither of them are injured at all. There's not even any significant bruising. It's just like, oh, car was destroyed, whatever. Like they were gigantic tornadoes and thunder. Insane wind speeds, but no, we're fine. Both of them completely unharmed. Also, apparently Nux had Max's shotgun this whole time, and it was loaded, but he never once decided to use it.
Witness me, Bloody!
That's weird. Even when Max pushed his friend off the car and attempted to enter the driver's seat and then forced himself into the front of the car to stop Nux from blowing himself up, Nux never thought to use the shotgun. His war boy buddy didn't even think to use the shotgun. They just forgot it was there. Well, it's very convenient now that Max has his iconic weapon, but the thing won't shoot due to sand clog or something. Hilariously, Max is chained to Nux and a car door, so he's forced to drag them along with him until he finds Furiosa's truck and all of the women bathing themselves in water, which I suppose is totally fine to waste in the middle of the desert. Granted, this truck is very large and it must hold a lot of water. They just kind of let it spray into the sand for way too long. They give the hose to Max, and he drinks from it by blasting himself in the face with it. He's ingesting 1% of the water. All the rest of it is just going everywhere else. Do you know how hard it would be to drink water like that? To prepare themselves to go into battle and sacrifice their lives for Immortan Joe, the war boys spray their lips and teeth with what looks to be spray paint. Both the war boys and Immortan Joe mention how doing this will allow them to enter the gates of Valhalla shining in chrome. However, in an interview with Crave Online, actor Hugh Keys-Byrne, who plays Immortan Joe, said that this practice was purely ritualistic and involved the inhalation of a very euphoric drug that kept the war boys high and suicidally devoted to Immortan Joe. Another clue to the spray's drug-like properties is the fact that chrome and chroming are Australian slang terms for drug abuse. There's this fight that breaks out between Max and Furiosa, and it's amazing. Apparently, Tom Hardy broke his nose while filming a fight scene with Charlize Theron, where she accidentally elbowed him in the face. To be honest, she might have done this on purpose, since there was bad blood between them. And maybe he took that personally. That's why they fought. This fight is awkward and hilarious because Max is attached to a body and a door, all the while he still has that face mask locked on his head. During this scene, Max has a pistol shot directly next to his head, but unlike the shotgun scene from Mad Max 1, this time they remembered to put the ear ringing in. It lasts for a total of 3 seconds.
And it's gone.
When it would actually last for much longer. It's fine though, because it would be pretty silly to have ear ringing for the next hour and 22 minutes. Max pays back Furiosa, because once he has the gun loaded, he fires 3 shots directly next to her head. So she's just deaf now in that ear. No ringing needed, just cut the sound entirely.
What?
She repays him later by firing a rifle right next to his head.
Don't breathe.
This would definitely cause permanent ear damage. It's not even a discussion. Like, his ear would be obliterated after this. Nux is kind of a moron in this movie. He's delusional enough to think that Max is on his side simply because they helped each other fight off the girls, when Max was his hood ornament that same day. Max punches the guy, takes his jacket, steals the truck, and drives away. But the truck stops because it has a kill switch that only Furiosa knows about, so they all end up driving together.
You want that thing off your face?
You shouldn't be able to drive the car at all before activating this kill switch, right? Like you should have to activate it and then drive the car. Maybe it activates after a certain period of time after driving. Like if you drive for more than a mile without turning off this kill switch, then the truck will turn off. Is that how it works? I'm not a mechanic or an engineer, I don't know. I mean, it could work that way. It's not very effective when it comes to stopping someone from stealing the truck though, because they can still take the truck and drive away with it, just for like a mile or two. Eventually, Furiosa and the girls catch up to the truck, and they all end up driving together. Turns out the Gastown boys are after them as well, and they're led by someone called the People Eater. I guess Immortan Joe sent someone to Gastown to tell them of Furiosa. You might be wondering how these Gastown people know where Furiosa is, because they didn't see her drive away like Immortan Joe did. The only way these Gastown guys would know about Furiosa is if Immortan Joe sent someone to tell them. And even if this person informed them of the general location they were driving, I'm guessing it would still take a long time for them to pack up all their shit and start driving towards Furiosa, unless they're all just hanging out in their cars already. I know I'm thinking too much into it. I know.
Signal Gastown. Convoy's on its way.
This People Eater guy is so goofy, with a bedazzled nose piece and holes in his suit for nipple clamps. What the fuck? There's even a scene of him playing with his nipple. Furiosa had struck a deal with some biker gang. Apparently she would give them some fuel, and in turn they would close off a passage to stop any of her pursuers. But instead of giving them the gas, she ends up double-crossing them, risking her life and the lives of all these girls. I mean, maybe they needed the gas, but I don't think they ever end up using it. This results in another chase, except this time it's motorcycles versus this war rig. But they're like motocross bikes, so they can drive through dirt. They jump over the truck and throw bombs down at it, but they're not very effective. They don't do much to the truck, but they are pretty cool stunts. Immortan Joe's monster truck was able to bypass the obstruction, so he's in hot pursuit. Later, one of the girls is hanging off the outside of the truck, and she barely manages to survive smashing into a rock. Apparently, these girls are exposing themselves to Immortan Joe, so they won't attack the truck, because Immortan Joe doesn't want these girls damaged. To him, they're like a really nice Rolex, you know? You don't want to get dirt on it, you don't want to scratch it. After she avoids getting killed by this rock, Max gives her this limp thumbs up, only for her to then fall off the truck because the door falls off. Joe doesn't want to squish his pregnant breeder, so he flips the truck to avoid hitting her. Furiosa asks Max if he saw her die.
Did you see it?
And he's like, yeah, she's fucking dead, dude. Fuck her.
Did you see it?
She went under the wheels.
I just want to mention again how absurdly durable Furiosa's truck is in this movie. I think people try to pop the tires 40 times. People throw bombs at it, they shoot it. They shoot harpoons into the back of it. This thing is indestructible. It's crazy. What kind of tires are those? Because I'm positive she could drive over Mount Everest with this truck. Nux has these two tumors on his collarbone, and he named them Larry and Barry. He even tattooed faces on them. I love that. I love Larry and Barry. He even speaks about how they're probably going to kill him one day.
For a while, even Larry and Barry stopped chewing on my windpipe.
So then we get this nighttime scene, but it was actually filmed in the daytime. An editor just made it look like it was nighttime in post, in a very similar way they did it in the movie Nope. They're being chased by this guy called the Bullet Farmer. He shoots at them and he's way off target. It's only after Furiosa blinds him with a shot of her own when he magically starts firing on target. Kind of weird how that works. Maybe that's part of the joke, you know? Like he couldn't hit shit when he could see, but now that he's blind, he's all of a sudden like... super deadly. So the group drives away to hopefully find the green place when they finally meet their match. A puddle of mud. Bombs, bullets, saw blades, none of that is effective, but mud. Oh. I guess Furiosa forgot to put chains on her tires. Very conveniently, there's a tree directly in front of them that's on solid ground. Like there's a bunch of mud and their truck is stuck in the mud. Directly in front of their truck is a singular tree. It's the only tree here. I'm not exaggerating. There's one tree in this entire area. And it's right in front of them on solid ground where they need to be. I mean, can you blame me for thinking it's a little contrived? So they tie the truck to the tree, obviously, and they use the tree to pull the truck out of the mud. And Max like hugs the tree to add his weight to the tree as if that would do anything. And Furiosa hilariously tries pushing the truck. This thing weighs enough to not be picked up by a tornado. But yeah, sure, Furiosa, she's really helping right now, you know? Put your back into it, girl. We then see these strange guys walking around this area on 4 stilts. No other explanation is given. Maybe they're looking for food or water or whatever. It doesn't matter. That's the kind of world building I like. Just show me some weird shit and never explain it. And then I'm forced to sit there thinking, so what was that? Kind of like those jester guys in Dune Part 2 or the dog human thing. Both of those things are awesome and I like them a lot, but they just kind of exist. I think more movies should do that. Be bold, put random bullshit in your movie. The internet ruined this next scene for me. We see this woman screaming atop a tower. She's bare ass naked. And then Max points up to her and he's like, that's bait.
That's bait.
And since then, 1 billion people all across the internet have used that meme, and it kind of ruined it. I'm sorry. The internet just ruins shit. You might know this from a series I did a while ago. Furiosa meets up with some women, and she learns the truth of the green place. There's no home to return to anymore. Only a handful of old women on motorcycles remain. Somehow Furiosa knew exactly what to say to the woman on the tower in order to signal all the rest of the women, you know, tell them that it's all right to come out. And Furiosa says it was like 7,000 days since she left home.
7,000 days? Plus the ones I don't remember.
Long enough for her entire home to reduce to mud. Like that mud area was once the green place. She hasn't been there since she was a little kid, but somehow she knows this phrase.
I am one of the Bubbalini, the many mothers.
How would she know what to say to this woman atop this tower? You know, like, it's just not very believable. I can hardly remember a password I set last week. How can this girl remember? Max and the girls agree to overtake the Citadel together. Initially, these girls had the dumbest plan imaginable. They were just going to drive as far out into the desert as they possibly could and hope for the best. Use up all their gas, and if they ended up in the middle of nowhere, they would just die, I guess.
You know, hope is a mistake.
So Max is like, you guys are insane. Let's just go back to the Citadel and try our best to take it over because there's a shit ton of water there. Everything is there. It makes no sense to risk your life to do nothing. So the girls are like, all right, you have a point. There's yet another car chase. Nux and Max take turns spitting gas directly into the engines to make them speed up. I have no idea if this is possible or if that's how it actually would work, but it looks pretty cool. And I don't know, it sounds like a very Mad Max thing to do. So I'm not complaining. If it makes no sense, whatever. I think it's cool. The final car chase in this movie is so awesome. You've got these guys on towering poles, bending backwards and forward. One of them is able to swipe one of the girls from the truck, so she's toast. No, literally, that's her name. What's really strange to me is that the canyon is completely cleared of all of the rocks on both sides when Furiosa and the others head back through it to return to the Citadel. When in reality, it would have been impossible for Joe's men when they first drove through it to not only make enough room for their biggest vehicles, but also to completely clear the area of the huge rocks and still join him by sunset to pursue the war rig. Maybe the drugs they're on make them work at hyperspeed. I can't even fathom how they got some of these shots. It must have been so dangerous, constantly driving at high speeds with all this equipment and people hanging off the sides of these vehicles, jumping from one to another, climbing up them, people atop these massive moving poles that are on cars that are moving, with fire blazing every which way, and people tossing spears at each other. It must have been hell to shoot. Furiosa gets stabbed by Voldemort's wand in one scene, and oh goodness, it hurts. Max is able to hijack People Eater's rig. Eventually, he abandons it, and it explodes, and it's such a sick explosion. And over 80% of the effects seen in this film are practical effects. Max gets in a fight with someone near the guitarist on that stage. It's so funny. He even uses the guitar to fight him, and the guitarist is on these bungees, so whenever he gets pushed or pulled around, he just flops back to where he was. Eventually, we learn that the guitarist is blind, and he just sits there and plays metal. Furiosa kills Joe by literally ripping his face off, using her arm and a tire. I have no complaints. This rules. This movie, with all of its measly flaws, is still considered by me to be one of the best action movies ever made. Furiosa is gravely injured, but Max is able to save her. Originally, this guy was just a cop. I'm not sure where he learned all this stuff about saving people's lives. He stabs her in the perfect spot in her body to help her breathe. I don't know. It's just like, did this guy read a manual or something? Like, what? He's not a paramedic. I'm so confused. Did he save a doctor in this new Mad Max universe with Tom Hardy? Did he teach him stuff? Because that's not information everybody knows. Max drives back to the Citadel with the group of baddies and Joe's corpse. The girls are lifted into the Citadel's paradise as water is freely given to those below. Because I guess there's an unlimited amount of water. It just spawns from under the ground somewhere. Max decides to go his own way, again, like usual. We never truly learn what those PTSD flashbacks were about. The editor of this movie is Margaret Sixel, George Miller's wife. Bravo to her. She crushed this movie. George Miller had said that if a guy edited this movie, it would end up looking like every other action movie. And I guess he was right, because his wife received an Academy Award for Best Editing. So yeah, that's Mad Max Fury Road. An incredible movie, I love it. Next up, we have the new movie, Furiosa. Obviously, it's gonna be hard for me to use the footage for this movie because it literally just came out. But I will tell you my thoughts anyway. I ended up getting tickets for a D-Box showing. For those that don't know, that just means that the chairs rumble and stuff with the movie to give you this like 4D experience. And oh boy, this was definitely the movie to do that for. So I just got back from seeing Furiosa. Can you tell?
What on earth is that?
In the coldest theater known to man. Oh my God, it was literally 50 degrees in there. I don't know what it is in Celsius, like 25 or something. It was freezing. My wife and I had sweaters on. We live in Vegas, mind you. Not that that should matter because we were inside, but still. Wearing sweaters in May in Vegas isn't very common, I don't think. Also, our theater was empty. There was no one there. It was so weird. It's 7 o'clock on a Friday. The movie just came out. What the hell? I think movies are dying. It's sad. It honestly kind of sucks. People just aren't going to the movies anymore. I thought Furiosa would be a pretty big hit, but maybe I was wrong. I also went to see it in a special theater. It's called D-Box. They have these cool seats that kind of like rumble with the movie. They recline and they have seat heaters. So it's a pretty cool movie theater experience. If only the heat seaters weren't a necessity. Like we had toasty butts, but the rest of us were freezing.
Feels like my asshole's on fire.
But honestly, the D-Box experience was amazing for this movie. I kind of wish I was able to see Fury Road in this same way because there's so many cool action scenes and the rumbling seats emphasize them so well. So it was even weirder that there was nobody there. Also, watching a post-apocalyptic movie about a desert wasteland in a theater that makes you feel like you're chilling with some penguins, it didn't do a lot for our immersion. So let's talk about the movie. It was great. I loved it. George Miller knocked it out of the park again. This is very much Fury Road 2. A lot of the same elements from Fury Road you'll find in this movie, just like in most of the other Mad Max movies. What I liked about this movie is that it explored the world of Fury Road more. Fury Road is a little bit separate from the other Mad Max movies. Sure, it still has Max in it, but it's kind of like this new version of the wasteland. In this movie, we explore the wasteland much more thoroughly than we did in Fury Road. We get to see the green place before it, turned into mud place. We get to see Gas Town. We get to see the bullet farm. Of course, we go back to the Citadel. Chris Hemsworth was amazing as Dementis. His lines were so good throughout the movie. They were sharp and witty. He's much different from the typical Mad Max villain because he's obviously intelligent. He's also extremely savage. This guy goes above and beyond with his villainy in this movie. He's definitely kind of a sociopath and not like your typical drugged up cult person from Mad Max. This guy is just an evil bastard and he does some pretty fucked up things to people throughout the movie. But he's also kind of endearing. I found him strangely likable, which is kind of weird for a revenge story because this movie's basic premise is Furiosa trying to enact revenge on Dementis. But when the time came to kill the guy, I wasn't like jumping for joy, really. It was kind of an awkward situation. I wasn't against his death, but at the same time, it was like, this guy's kind of fun to watch. You know what I mean? Like, it would be a shame if you killed. We get to see Furiosa as a little kid and we watch as she grows up. We learn why she does the black forehead thing. We learn how she lost her arm. It's an origin story, partly a love story at one point, and then it turns into a revenge story. Also, Max is in this movie for like 3 seconds, and I was pretty hyped to see him, not gonna lie. You don't see his face, but it's still like, oh cool, it's Max. Yeah. There's a ton of amazing stunts in this movie, as you would expect. There's a lot of people floating through the air in this movie, whether they're on balloons or gliders or these little helicopter things. People are flying all over the place in this movie, throwing bombs down. It's crazy, but it's also amazing. There's this one guy with this massive black octopus parachute, and it's so cool looking. I wish they had this thing on screen longer because it was on screen for like 5 seconds and then the guy's dead and you're like, oh, well, it was cool while it lasted. Just like in Fury Road, this movie has amazing cinematography. There's one scene in particular that stood out to me. Furiosa uses a gate to avoid a flamethrower, and it's so awesome looking. She's got these flames spewing around her and she's just standing there. It's sick. All right, now I'm going to complain about a couple things. All right, so nearing the end of the movie, they talk about this 40-day war in the wasteland. It's Dementus versus Immortan Joe. And I guess this war went on for 40 days because Dementus had control over Gastown and they weren't cooperating with each other. Immortan Joe needs gas and Dementus needs food and water and whatever. So they would trade back and forth. You know, they had a mutual arrangement. But then this war breaks out, right? So they're both fighting for resources. So I'm just sat there thinking, what? 40 days? So Immortan Joe's people went 40 days without getting gas. How are they driving around? Dementus and his guys went 40 days without water and food. How are they alive? It really doesn't make all that much sense unless they're regularly stealing from one another or scavenging what they need from the wasteland. When your supply is cut off like that, war doesn't make a lot of sense. Also, Furiosa gets away with things in this movie that I don't think she would. She's initially traded by Dementus to Immortan Joe. So Immortan Joe is given Gastown and they have this trade agreement. So Immortan Joe puts Furiosa into his big vault of women. He has this vault. So Furiosa cuts all of her hair and she escapes. One of Immortan Joe's kids chases after her, but he loses her. And then we see her like dangling off of this. How did you get there? Is she part monkey? I'm confused. And she got there very quickly too. This stuff mostly doesn't matter, by the way. The movie's still amazing. It's just tiny little nitpicks. There's another scene when Furiosa escapes Dementus and his biker gang by cutting her arm off, stealing one of their bikes and riding away. They don't show her do this. They just show her all of a sudden she's gone now. Dementus was kind of ignoring what was going on and the bikes were circling the area, but still, she would have to remove her arm and then steal a bike and then ride past these people who are circling her without any of them noticing her do this. I don't know, man. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Like, nobody had their eyes on her. Whatever. And then she gets noticed by Max, who then steals her away and sells her to someone. It's like this literal arms dealer who buys people's body parts. Either that or like an organ harvester or whatever, but she has a bunch of arms and legs hanging all over the place. Also, Furiosa survives without an arm for way too long, I think. If her arm was really severed like that, she wouldn't have all that long to live. Realistically, she definitely probably would have died, but it is what it is. You know, she's just built different. There's also a scene when she's shot directly with an RPG and survives. The scene is badass, don't get me wrong. I love the scene. It hits her like directly, right? Like she's hiding behind this little thing of sand and it hits her and blows her back. And she's like, oh, gee, I'm covered in sand. I might be wrong about some of these complaints, okay? I might have to watch the movie again to really like refresh myself. Maybe they make more sense upon a rewatch, but it's just what I thought upon watching it for obviously my first time. These are just my initial thoughts. Dementus has this second in command who's like this guy who wears all black. He has these big black horns. And there's this scene when Dementus sacrifices this guy's men so they can enter Gastown. And this guy makes it known that he's very upset with Dementus. He's like, fuck you, man. I can't believe you would do that.
You're scum, Dementus!
But this leads to nothing, and it was so weird. I was expecting something to take place. Like this guy, he obviously harbors some resentment for Dementus, right? I know obviously Dementus killing his men lowers his leverage, right? You can't do much about that. But maybe betraying him later would make a little bit of sense, I think, but he never does. In this movie, Immortan Joe has this new child that we never met in Fury Road, so obviously he dies in this movie. He kind of reminds me of Vegeta because he has like the Vegeta hairstyle. He's got that massive forehead with with the little widow's peak at the top. Just kind of made me think of that one image of Vegeta without hair. It still haunts me to this day. Anyway, I don't think they ever show this guy's death, which is kind of a missed opportunity. Maybe Furiosa's boyfriend should have killed him at one point or something. I think he dies during the 40-day war. That'd make the most sense to me. If they did show it, I don't know, it didn't leave an impact on me, obviously, which is kind of strange. I was expecting more from that character. Also, apparently Anya Taylor-Joy didn't know how to drive a car prior to filming this movie.
I don't have a license. I had never driven a car in my life.
You had literally never driven a car before you were in a Mad Max?
When George Miller calls you and asks you, do you want to learn how to drive a car to be a Mad Max? You say yes.
Which makes it so funny that she would star in a Mad Max movie of all movies if she's never driven a car. But she did great. She kicked ass in this role. I'm serious. She was a great casting choice, in my opinion. Also, Alila Brown as young Furiosa did great as well. The People Eater is back with his weird nipples.
Yummy!
This new child of Immortan Joe is named Scrotus, by the way. So that's iconic. Rictus Erectus and Scrotus. Why does Immortan Joe pick the weirdest names for his kids? Like, he has the most basic ass name, Joe. And he has a kid and he's like, Scrotus. I'm on IMDb right now, and I guess the guy with the octopus parachute is called the Octo Boss. Pretty cool. At the very end of this movie, they show how Furiosa got the girls out of the vault. She waited until nightfall and then covertly ushered them all to the truck, where she hid them until daytime, where she would drive away like in Fury Road. Which leads me to ask, why did she wait so long? She could have obviously just driven away when everybody was asleep. It's not like the Citadel has this big gate that she has to open or something. It's wide open. And I guess this vault isn't guarded at nighttime. How did she get it open? I guess she had access to it. Also, her turning Dementus into a tree with that little seed that she had from her mother, loved it. That's the kind of weird shit I love. Also, when Furiosa was a child and she all of a sudden vanished from the vault, they never show Immortan Joe freaking out about this or having any sort of widespread search done. Remember how insane he went in Fury Road when he figured out that they were all missing from his vault?
Where is she taking them?
He treasures them more than anything else in the world. This guy just wants to reproduce. He's like a wannabe Genghis Khan. But unfortunately for him, all of his kids are fucked up. So wouldn't he be really upset if she were missing all of a sudden? But there's never any like big search. They just skip ahead and they're like, oh, she's pretending to be a boy and she's all of a sudden accepted by these people. They didn't question her or anything. She just came out of nowhere and they're like, hey, you can join our team and help us. Also, the CGI in some scenes was a little bit too noticeable for my taste. For most of the movie, it was fine, but there were a few spots I remember seeing that were like, oh, that's not real. But I would say for like 99% of the film, it was solid. Stunts, camera work, acting, everything was on point. Such a cool movie. Loved it. Watching this and Fury Road back to back has got to be like one of the coolest double features ever. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Furiosa and the Mad Max movies. Let me know what you thought of them in the comment section down below.